several years ago, when I would start worship, we would have maybe 3 people in the pews at the beginning of worship. They would gradually filter in as a depressed congregation will be later and later coming to worship. They gradually filtered in. And I would have in the low 20s when I finished the worship service.
Here and now, our congregations are anything but parish churches to which people automatically come to be enrolled. Today, disciples' congregations must come to understand themselves as mission stations.
I found that the congregation was sort of living mentally in a city that hadn't existed for 30 years. They thought this was a nice, quiet retirement community. And we began to realize that we didn't know our neighbors at all.
So we thought about that. What is it that our unique location could be used by the greater denomination as a place of mission and a place that could be beneficial to the greater church?
And we were finding that harder to do than we thought. In the meantime, we had a problem with homeless people sleeping on the property and sometimes graffiti and sometimes leaving trash on the property. And we were trying to get rid of that problem because that was certainly going to drive away the nice middle-class folks we wanted to reach.
And it was like our kitchen counter was a wall between 2 groups of people that we had made. The people on one side are the people with housing and with a bit of money in their pocket. The people on the other side of the counter are the people without housing and on public assistance.
One day, through a tragedy, a murder that happened in the community, we realized that these homeless folks we were stepping over to go to worship on Sunday, they are our neighbors. They live in the neighborhood. They're our neighbors. And they have a need and a right to a church as much as anyone else.
Listening means more than just letting sound come into your ears. When you listen, you slow down and you really take in what's being said.
God opened a door and said, you're saying you want to do ministry that's relevant to the neighborhood you're in. Are you really willing, to do this? And the amazing thing is the congregation walked through that door and began to open up their heart and arms to the homeless community. And it didn't just transform the homeless community, it transformed us, and it's had an impact on the whole neighborhood.
This church is located 1 block from the coast of the Monterey Bay, a mission sanctuary, and we're surrounded by people in the marine biology industry. So we went into the neighborhood and we formed partnerships with the Monterey Aquarium, Sea Studios, and now we're very excited, NOAA, we're very excited to be connected with the Limpet program. We bring in youth groups from around the country. They get to live here on campus for a week, and while they're here they have a learning serving experience. They have work projects they get to do, from sand dune restoration to beach cleanup. We look at how often the scriptures talk about the ocean and the sea. They learn about a Christian response to ocean stewardship. And they learn that through working not only with the theologians here at the church, but also with the marine biologists that are our neighbors.
My name is Ann Wasser, and I am the Limpets Program Coordinator at the Pacific Grove Museum of Natural History. And we will be taking blue theology students out to the beach to monitor sand crab populations, which has been going on in sanctuaries in California for about 10 years now. So the students will be collecting data and then inputting that data into a database where they can graph and see sort of the change in population over time.
When we first thought about doing blue theology, we thought it would be a great program as an elder hostel. And so we started brainstorming that, and once we realized what it would cost to convert one of our buildings into private rooms for older people, that was just something we couldn't afford. So instead, we started thinking about youth groups.
Is it the Phoenix who burns itself up and then it raises again? Well, we have burnt ourselves up. We've had everybody who didn't like having homeless people around, who didn't like having the china gone and the silverware missing and a dirty kitchen and people hanging out around the steps, have left the church. So we are left with a very small core of people who realize that this land that we're standing on is sacred space and that it's a healing space, and that over the years it's become what it was always meant to be, which is a place where people can be healed.
Most of the obstacles have been from the neighbors who didn't want to have to look at homeless people. And, we're doing much better with that because it's been several years of helping them to understand that the folks they're seeing around the church working and volunteering and picking weeds and trimming roses were people that were sleeping in their backyards and they just didn't know it. It's not that these are new faces in the neighborhood. They're just able to come up out of their holes and hold their head up high.
One person in our group decided to open the building 2 hours a week before the meal to do art with people. And that completely changed the atmosphere. It no longer feels like a food factory with long lines of sad people in our social hall. It's a happier place since the art program started, with music and conversations and friendships developing. And it's great to see people with their piece of art stand up and be proud of what they've created.
Do you think the atmosphere has changed at all since we've had art music? I mean, do you think it's different
It
having art
seems
music?
a little more relaxed in here sometimes, and we still have a few individuals that want to cause a little, but we got to be patient. I mean, like the precepts, deep listening, loving speech, mindful consuming, all that. It all takes place even in art.
Another thing that happened was that one of our retired members decided to come and play cards with some of the guys before dinner. When you get on the other side of the counter, when we got out from behind the counter, we found that we'd come to know people better and to know their stories. And that's when we discovered that sometimes listening is painful. You can't fix always what you hear about.
I mean, just the confusion of a street person.
Yeah.
Stand anyway, because when you're dealing with especially the really desperate hardcore street population, a lot of them aren't going to make it.
Yeah.
But everyone that comes to the Circle Church knows that they're truly and genuinely loved and accepted and welcomed just as they are, even if that's really messed up today.
Last week we had a memorial service for a 59-year-old man named Roger, who we knew well. And he died on the sidewalk outside our church. For months we watched Roger drink himself to death. And it broke our hearts. We just can't do this anymore without responding.
Because there is no difference between my addictions and the person who's dealing with an alcohol addiction. I personally deal with food addiction, which I battle with, so I understand, people who regret their behaviors and don't understand why they do what they really don't want to do.
There would be private conversations about one individual in particular whose body odor was just unbearable, who always wanted a hug. And everybody sucked it up and gave her a hug, and held her breath and did it because she needed hugged. And by the way, that person bathes regularly now.
A few of us had heard about a little church in Seattle that started a place called the Recovery Cafe. It's a beautiful place to go to 5 days a week to get support for breaking free from substance abuse. We're learning from them about how to do this kind of work. And we plan to open our own recovery cafe gradually over the next year. So when we do our meal program in the future, it will be connected to a process of being in recovery. And then we feel like we'll be able to do more than just offer physical bread.
It's been great for this congregation because the people who live here, they tend to live here because they love being this close to the bay and to the ocean. And so for us to invite people in and to teach them about conservation of the ocean, we feel is a strong call for us that we're doing God's work by teaching this to people, blue theology.
And as we've gone through this journey, I did a little research because of some of the concerns of some of the neighbors with us drawing all these homeless folks to the circle here, and found that crime had dropped by about 50% over 3 years. We think we're really making a difference, along with other things, but we think we're really making a difference in making the community better. The church is much cleaner and better cared for. And many in the homeless community have figured out that, if they're being respected, it's appropriate for them to respect their neighbors as well. And so we're all learning to be good neighbors with each other. And that's really made a difference in the whole neighborhood.
On Sunday morning, when there's just a little group of us, we have to remind ourselves of all the people who've been in our building all week. We have to remind ourselves that it's our role as a church not just to see how many people we can get in the door on Sunday, but to offer people a chance to allow God to change their lives. That may not happen on Sunday morning. It may happen in a recovery circle or through relationships made over dinner. That can happen any day of the week. And we just want to listen to learn how we can be partners with God in making that happen on whatever day of the week it needs to happen.